Hey everyone, it's Carrie again, and before you start this video, I just want to remind you that there is a prerequisite to video to this, which is the Google Earth tutorial video that I created. So make sure you watch that because it's going to help you follow along with this one. And so today we're focusing on creating an invasive map. I did some of this work with our teams last week, and I've recorded that as well as finishing up that work so I can show you guys how to do it. And so we've used this on one of our sites, specifically Perch Creek, and the partner wanted us to create an invasive map, but it can also be relevant for all of you if you need to create an invasive map with some of that data you collected throughout the season. Before the video kicks off, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what's going to be covered today, and we're going to start off with a site description of Perch Creek, which is the site that we mapped for. Then we're going to move on to some questions that my folks had for me, as well as I had for them. One being, what is a transect and why do we use it for monitoring? And another one, why is invasive mapping important? So make sure you watch out for those. Those are some questions you'll want to answer after this video as well. Once we've gotten through the question portion, we go ahead and switch over to actually creating the map. And that's going to work through first showing you what we did with the transect information, then the waypoints, and finally creating the polygons so we can get the acreage for all of the species that we mapped. And before creating the map itself, I just tossed in there some tips for note-taking in the field because that's a lot of stuff we ran into while we were having this session. So there's 3 tips for taking notes in the field that I want you guys to look out for, so make sure you look out for those. And finally, the last 3 steps of completing a map. This is Perch Creek, and Debbie, it was kind of cool. I didn't know Debbie was working with this site too. So Debbie mentioned the peninsula of Mobile, which she's talking about this area right here, and that's that area that her organization, the Peninsula of Mobile, protects. And so this property is actually owned by Tom Hutchins, who is a private landowner. The city is currently trying to purchase the land to create it into a park. And so what they have us do is they asked us to, do kind of like a baseline study of what plants are there, what roads and trailways, and I'll go over all this so that they can know what they need to do to get it ready to make it into a park. And just to give you guys an idea of where we are in Mobile. So this is downtown so James Seals is like right up here. So this property is about 20 minutes south if you drive down this way. This is Dog River, by the way, the other organization that Debbie runs. So focus on Creek. This is an 80-acre property. We only mapped the areas that are uplands. There's a lot of it that's marsh. I think it's about 35 acres. So just to show you guys what it looks like, these green lines are the transects. So this is a way, well, let me ask you guys, who wants to tell me what to do with the transect? Why do we use transects from what we've learned from monitoring?
So restate your question real quick, please.
So what is a transect and how would we use it?
So, I mean, when we use it, we do if I remember correctly, it's like a 50-meter line or something like that. And it depends why you're using it for the project, because I know at Rio Vista, we've used it to map invasives and natives, and then and that's what we do on most properties, but it really just depends on what your partner wants, and then you just track that over time, because you can make those transects and make a map like this where you can go back and track if you've done any clearing to see if anything's coming back, or if natives are thriving, and so on.
Awesome. Great answer. Yeah, so basically, the reason we have these transects is because it would be really hard to just really get a good overview of the whole property if we weren't designating specific areas. And you can see here that we pretty much did cover the whole property because of the level that they wanted us, the information that they wanted us to get. And so the way I did this is I just drew these lines with the path tool up here. Just before I even show you guys how to create an invasive map, can anybody explain, or does anybody remember from the training back, I think it was like in November, where we went over invasive mapping, the 2 reasons why partners would want invasive maps?
I think one of the reasons was so they can tell contractors like exactly where to cut and where to treat, so they don't accidentally like get native species or non-invasive species, and so they just like don't I guess don't trample anything else or something like that.
I think it also had to do
That for an
something with
estimate of
like
supplies
economic
needed.
reasons.
Oops. All right, let's do Braylon first and then Austin.
I was gonna say, I think it's also for an economic reason, so they know exactly how much money they have to spend for, you know, either herbicide or for contractors to go out there, because if they don't know the exact number, then they can either, you know, order too many or too less of what they actually need and end up wasting money and still have the problem that they're of the invasive species.
What were you going to say, Austin?
Same thing.
Okay. Yeah, you guys, I'm glad you still remember that. That's awesome. That's definitely kind of combined. One of the reasons is so they know where it's at and they know, you know, how much money they need. Like, for example, the work we did with Bon Secours last year, they were able to get that grant. I think it was for $40,000 because that's how much it was going to cost to treat the invasives and the labor on that property, which if they would have applied for, you know, $100,000 grant because they thought there was more invasives, they might not have gotten it. Okay, so there's one other reason, and it's kind of related to like survey data, like how Adam was explaining with the gopher tortoises. Anybody think of that one?
I can take a guess.
Okay.
So they can see how their land has changed and developed over time.
Yep. It's all about having that data throughout history. So a big thing is they want, so if we just treat the invasives time and time again, we might not see if there's actually a decline, but if we're mapping that, you know, every so often, we can actually see that if our management practice is working. Does that make sense to everybody?
I will just add, like, as an example, I know the refuge I worked on in Florida, we'd have to like map the invasives every year, and you could see the trend over time where we treat them every single year. It started off as like a big patch. It was a disturbed piece of land where they had dredged the bay and they had dumped their spoils there. We called it like the spoil deposits. And initially, invasive species just took over those spoil deposits, and then we were going back every single year and treating all those invasive species. And like over time, you could see that giant patch of invasive species was shrinking. But it wasn't all at once. Like it's not like we treated all the invasives once and they didn't come back. Like they still came back, but the natives were able to come in a little bit, and then we treated them the next year and they all died again. And then the invasives in the middle came back, but the natives were able to move in a little bit more. So you can see in time that eventually that patch will be eliminated if we keep treating the exotics every year, even though that's expensive and a pain to do. But the data shows that what we're doing is in time working. But yeah, generally, if you just treat a giant patch of invasive species once, it doesn't eliminate them. And that's another reason why it's important to map them so you know where to go back to and keep up the fight.
Awesome, Creighton. Glad you have that experience to share. Yeah, definitely. And that ties back to funding. A lot of like the programs that we work with or the partners that we work with, they get funding through government grants, as well as the nonprofits. And so having that history that you've, been mapping it and can show that it's declining, they're more willing probably to give you, continue to give you money if you have that track record. Does anybody have any questions before that?
The only question I had is how you separated the two waypoints since we were using two different GPSs. Like if there weren't, wouldn't they be coming in as the same numbers?
So to answer your question, Britt, if you've used two different GPSs in the field, yeah, you could come up with some of the same waypoint numbers. So I'm going to show you what I did. So you can see over here, I have GPS 1 waypoints already open, and I've split those into each transect. So I just opened GPS 2 waypoints. You can see a ton of stuff pops up. You can see all the waypoints right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the waypoints that fall within each transect, and I can do that from the notes. So I'm adding a folder for waypoints for transect 11 because that's where the notes started for using the second GPS unit. You can see that it created a different folder. I'm going to make sure that it's on its own. I'm going to look at the sheet to see which waypoints go within that transect 11, and I'm going to pull them into that folder for transect 11. You can see I'm just going to pull them on up into that folder and place them in there. You can see through transect 21, we have a few waypoints left over. So this is possibly because when people were taking notes, they just didn't write down the description for that waypoint and they accidentally dropped it. Or when I was moving these into the folders, I accidentally missed possibly one of them. So that's something you could just, when you're going through each transect, you can see in the notes if you've missed either this 199 or 129 over here.
Like, how are you making like the different folders? Like some of them, like on the left, they look like little globes, and some of them look like file folders, and then some of them are the little waypoint pens.
Yeah, okay. So when I wanted to create a new folder, you just right click and click add, and you click folder. And so let's say there was a transect 23. I call it P23. This is just an example, and it'll pop up. So right now it's living under this waypoint, the GPS 2. So if I close it, it disappears. But you can drag it and make it its own folder. And then if I put stuff in it, it would have this drop down right here, and it would show what's in that file. That makes sense?
So, yeah, but what about like the little globes, like that GPS?
So this just means I've saved it. So if I go up here, what I did is I right-clicked, I did save place as, and then I saved it in our Perch Creek folder, and that way I can go back and open this at a later time.
Okay.
And this is like, we need all of this so I can send it to the partner so that they can open that. The reason these don't have that is because if you don't want to save a million files to your computer, you can just make sure. So see how this says temporary places?
Mm-hmm.
There's also my places. And so if you go up here and click save and save my places, that's going to save all the information you have here. That way, if you close the program and open back up, it'll still have all of this information.
Okay, so basically the little globes and the folders are the same thing, just one of them, just a way for them to differentiate whether you'd saved it or not, like
Exactly.
separately. Okay,
Good question.
told you nitpicky.
No, it's great questions. Crew one collected not only invasive data, but also the native species at the property. And so that's another reason we use the transects, is so we could easily say where those are instead of dropping a waypoint for every single magnolia tree that we see. So the way that we're going to classify that is we'll just place a place mark on the west end of the transect. Call it transect 1. I think I changed it to T1 to keep it short. You can see that. And then if you right click and go into properties, you can add a description. So this is where when we send the partner this information, they'll be able to see what native plants are along this transect. And if you guys have your notes pulled up that I sent via email, you might see some of this as well. And so where am I getting this information from? This is all coming from the notes that the teams collected. And then the waypoints, you'll see on the sheets that you'll see like a number. So for transect 11, which I think I have Camille and Ashley doing, the first point is 344 and it says climbing fern. So that's where crew 1 went out and made dropped a waypoint, which all of you know how to do, and wrote down what species was there. And with that data, we're going to be able to code it in here and then draw polygons to get an acreage amount for the partner. I've already done some of the mapping here. This is what it looks like. This is the areas that have invasives. But before we even get to that, I'm going to show you guys how we put that information in. So I'm clicking on the next transect that I needed to work on, which is 9. And real quick, I'll pause this. So the reason it's broken up into 2 points is because there's this marsh right here, and I wasn't going to have our folks walk through the marsh. And then you'll see all the waypoints pop up. And this is where the interactive portion is going to come in. You guys are going to tell me what is for each waypoint. So you'll see I right click, go to properties, and then I can just name what that is. So some of the notes are a little bit different. So that one's privet extending to road. And so doing this, we'll be able to create the polygons. So let me make sure, we're not going to walk through all of these waypoints because there's a lot. I'm showing you how we kind of organize this. So I'm turning off anything that's not privet. That way we can just focus on leaving up what's privet and we can start creating those polygons. And so I'm just going through again and making sure there's not anything but privet. And then we can go ahead and start drawing our polygons. And so I did this by using the ruler tool because we want to find acreage. You can see at first I was like, I'm going to do both of these. And then later on, I'm like, no, there's too much space in between them. So sometimes you got to play with it. But we're just trying to encapture both of these points. It's kind of glitchy because you're trying to go at such a in-depth level. And then you can see this 0.03 acres. So I put that in the description. I changed this to privet so we know what it is. This is polygon 13 since we've already done the transects above. And the color I chose for privet was orange, so you can see that orange barrier. It's tallow along creek, and tallow is popcorn, so I chose yellow as that color. So you can see that we just have one point right here, but we want to do it along the creek. And I remember how far it is because I was actually with them this day. But usually this is like when we would do 1 point here and 1 point here and say tallow along creek. That way you can just do it along the bank. And then you take note of the acreage, change the color, and title it.
So you're talking about other programs. Other programs allow you to like switch the orders of layers. Can you do that in Google Earth or no?
Yeah, so the layers down here is what Matthew's talking about. And I've tried to do that, but they don't allow you to pick them up and move them.
Okay. Yeah, I've never used Google Earth before. So.
And so in other programs, you can kind of, the reason that it's called layers is because you can move something on top of another one. And that way, you know, roads would appear on top of the land and stuff like that. Just another kind of limitation Google Earth has, but it can still do a lot.
About like the terrain button, like if you like clicked off the terrain, would that make the trees go away?
The terrain button?
All the way at the bottom of the screen that we see.
Oh, look at you. Oh my gosh. See, I'm learning from you guys too. That makes it a little bit easier. Can you see the next one at 213?
Yeah, 213.
And
It
what
says it's 80. It says 80% privet coverage.
Okay. And so I think we went over this back in November when we did the invasive mapping activity. It's always good if you can get a % coverage of an area, so that will also help you know, partners know if it's super prevalent in that area or not. But you don't have to. It's just if you want to include that. All right, moving on to 214. All right, 222.
222 through 225 are a mix of privet and tallow.
Okay.
Oh gosh. Terry, I just saw the last note under this, and it also says from 221 to 227 there's climbing burn in all of them as well.
There's from 220 what?
From 221 to 227.
Oh, I think I have those notes too, and that's actually 226. It just kind of looks like a 1.
Oh, okay. It just looks like a 1 from my picture.
So
Okay, that
the
makes
climb-
more sense anyway.
No
Yeah.
problem. That's a really important thing. So when you guys take these notes, make sure they're legible so we can read them so we make accurate maps. All right, go ahead. So the natives.
Ferns, more oaks, and less pines. And then it says ground skink.
More wildlife, nice.
Right. And then it says several snags / widowmakers. And the last note is more conifers by swamp.
Okay, I'm gonna put that up here by natives. And swamp, I'm gonna say marsh. When working with the crews, I only got so far, so I finished the project over the weekend, and you can see this is basically the final product. A lot of invasives and a lot of transect data. So the first step we want to do when we're going to create this map is make sure we save all the information in Google Earth, because we also want to give those that specific data to the partner. So the way I did that was I created a folder right here, this Perch Creek invasive and native data folder, and I moved everything into it. So I'll show you real quick how I did that. You can just right click, click add folder, and we'll just call this Perch Creek map creation. You can see it pops up. I brought it to the top, so it's right under my places. And then you can just drag all your features and place them in that folder, and you see that it moves it out of this one into this one. And you can do this quickly by clicking one of them, clicking shift, all of them, and drag them up into this Perch Creek map folder. And then again, we want to go ahead and do file, save my places. And also we want to save just this folder because it contains all of our information now as a place, and it'll save it as a KMZ however you like, and you just click save. That way you can access it, all the information that you created at a later point. Step 2 is to find the total acreage for each of these species that you've identified. And I show an example of this with the teams when I had just done the small section that we got through that day, but I also wanted to show you how you can do this easily for the whole site, which is to go up to Tools, click Tables, and it'll open, this is called an attribute table. So it's going to open every single polygon or line, any type of feature that you created, it's going to give you the information that you put in. And so you can just add all this up and it'll give you the total acreage for that species. But as I was saying, I didn't have all of this information yet, so I chose one species to work with the teams to kind of focus on, again, why we are doing this work. what I'm also going to do when I finish this is add up all of these acres. So let's go ahead and do that for Coral Ardesia. There's not too much of that. So I see 0.1. Make sure that doesn't include coral. Okay. 0.03. And that's all of the polygons we have so far. I know we mentioned it down here as well, but I'll add that. But just from what you see here, we have 0.13 acres. And so let me look at this too. I'll tell you guys what color I used for camphor, or I mean for Coral Ardesia. So I used the red. You can see the couple spots that it is. See how that came up and went? So we mentioned earlier, like there's two reasons we do this, and that's like to know how much herbicide we need to purchase and stuff like that. So knowing that there's only 0.13 acres of Coral Ardesia there, like how can that help a partner? Maybe I'm bad.
Knowing what he needs, right?
Say that again?
But knowing what he needs to watch out for and what he needs to treat, right?
Yeah, so one thing is we have the exact area of where the Coral Ardesia is, instead of just saying there's Coral Ardesia on this 80-acre property. And so another thing is, so we know Coral Ardesia is what? Can we use herbicide on it? How do we treat it? You guys have treated it before.
Hand pull and get all the berries.
Hand pull and get all the berries. Yeah, so it's going to, yeah, especially, so there are some herbicides I think you can use on it, but because this is a wetland property, they're not going to want to do that. And we need to get all those berries as well. So when a partner is planning this and they're going to decide if they're wanting to remove that Coral Ardesia or not, they're going to factor that in to the labor. Is like, so we have, how many hours is it going to take people to go out there and hand pull this stuff? And like, are we going to actually ask our contractors to do that? Or should we ask people like Gulf Corps to do that? Give them the fun job of plucking berries. So that's kind of how we get into this work. What was that?
Not necessarily with this property, but if it was a different land area and they were like, well, we're going to burn it anyway, and we just want to cut out these trees, and when the fire will take care of this and that.
So you're
Depends on
saying
your approach.
Yeah, so yeah, they might just decide they want to burn it if a species they know is going to kind of die down with that. But as we know, burning stuff doesn't necessarily get rid of it, right? Like with privet, those root systems are pretty deep. It's also with Coral Ardesia, so those plants are going to come back, and that's another reason why we actually treat the invasives and not just burn the property. But just trying to give an example of why we're doing all this, because 0.13 acres is a very small amount, and it's very helpful for them to know, like, that's the only area that people need to really go and hand pull things, versus the other invasives. You know, you're going to need like an herbicide to treat it. If you've watched the prerequisite video to this, which is the Google Earth tutorial, the Google Earth Basics video I created for everybody in Gulf Corps, you'll remember that you can create a map and save it as an image using this tool up here. And it's going to open up the title map and the legend. So This actually is not going to work because of how many features are on here. The way the legend works is that it's only going to pick up one feature class that can display. Now that's a little confusing, but so you can see here that it's showing for polygons, it's just only picking up one of our total polygons over here. So we're not going to be able to put each of the different colors down like we need to and say, you know, yellow is for tallow and orange is for privet. Instead of using this Google Earth save image to make a map, I went ahead and just took a screenshot of this, and you can do that just by clicking Windows and print screen, or there's a lot of different ways. There's a snipping tool you can use. And then I pulled that into a Word document. So this tool, the Save Image tool, is really helpful when you're making more of a basic map. So definitely don't toss that to the side. It's just for more complex maps, it's not going to allow us to show each feature class. Here is a PDF of the final product that I created. You can see I have a nice title here, Perch Creek Invasive Mapping, and the dates that we did that work. And then the really important part is I added this legend, and it coordinates with each of the colors of the different species. And then you can see I added that total acreage information right here. And another thing you want to add to the map is the credit that's due. So you can put this usually on the bottom right here. If you did download this data from somewhere else, you want to put that URL down here and the organization you got that from. But since we collected this data ourselves, I just put data collected by the Gulf Coast Student Conservation Association teams, and I give myself a little bit of credit for creating the map itself. And again, the way I created this PDF is I just put it in, I took a screenshot of the image of the map, I put it into Word, and then I added text boxes for legend and for the property boundary, invasives, and total acreage. So you kind of just go back to rudimentary basics and lay stuff on top of this image, and then you can just save it as a PDF and it comes out to be this lovely project. Yeah, so thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions or would like to set up a time with me to work as a group, leading and creating a invasive map on some of the projects you've worked on, I'd be happy to do that. Again, my contact information is in that other video, but I'll pull it up right now. So here's my contact information. Again, I recently got married, so my last name changed, but this is the email you can reach me at with any questions you have about this work, or if you want to set up a video where we're doing this for your teams, I'd be happy to help. All right, thanks guys.